Joining us now for World Brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Adefemi Akinsanya. Good morning, Adefemi.
Good morning, Dr. Rubin. Good morning, Ayo.
Good morning.
Femi
Femo. Oh, come on,
That's
man.
me.
Femi Femo.
Hi.
Oh, come on.
Did you have a good break?
Femi, I'm hearing that some people that are not naturally in the Fusheng-Bua house are not claiming Fusheng-Bua house. So
well, there's
that
a
they announced
few.
on stage that they are going to be the next Abuja Leo.
So,
Ijebu people, I don't know what's happening.
It's a request. He's made a request.
And there was a
he
letter
has an
before
intention
that
to lead the people.
Expression of interest.
And there was a letter before that we are seeing that originally they said they were from Fujipote and they announced they want to be Fusheng-Bua.
You know, somebody can have two parents, so maybe he comes from two houses. You never really know.
I just want to clarify you. So yeah.
There's a lot going on.
State and go to the world.
There's that. There is that. Clearly, he's a citizen of all the people. Good morning to you all, and good morning to you viewers. Let me tell you what's happening around the world. Now, a military coup almost reared its ugly head in West Africa again. But thanks to Nigeria's support, we begin this new week with Patrice Talon back in power as the president of the Republic of Benin. Now, on Sunday morning, 8 soldiers calling themselves the Military Committee for Refoundation appeared on state television to announce the dissolution of the Beninois government. Loyalist forces, supported by 2 Nigerian fighter jet missions and ground units, were able to regain control and restore constitutional order. Now, President Tinubu himself did praise Nigeria's military for defending Benin's 95-year democracy under ECOWAS protocols. Benin also confirmed that at least 23 mutineers, including Colonel Pascal Tigri, have been detained and are awaiting trial. Now, by 8 p.m. on Sunday, President Talon himself, this gentleman right here, made his first public appearance since the coup. He confirmed the coup attempt and also said that it had been foiled. Now, between 1960 and 2023, West Africa recorded 89 coup attempts. 60 of them were successful, including recent military takeovers in Mali, Guinea, Burkina Faso, and Niger, as well as attempted coups that we reported just recently in Guinea-Bissau, now in the Republic of Benin. So a lot going on in West Africa. Staying on the topic of security, French President Emmanuel Macron says that he and President Bola Ahmed Tinubu have agreed to strengthen cooperation. Now, in a post on X, the French president said that he has conveyed France's solidarity with Nigeria in the face of security challenges, especially in the north of the country. Now, confirming his intervention essentially comes at the request of President Tinubu. He then called on partners to step up their engagement. So clearly we're seeing more of a French presence in West Africa, thanks to Nigeria. Now, another example of this collaboration that we're seeing was seen when National Security Advisor Nuhu Rubadu received a United States congressional delegation in Abuja, reaffirming Nigeria's commitment to strengthening strategic security cooperation with the United States. Now, in a post on his official X handle, Rubadu said that the visit followed earlier engagements in Washington, D.C., which we also reported, and focus on shared priorities such as counterterrorism, regional stability, and a deepening of the Nigeria-US security partnership. Now, the delegation comprised of representatives including Mario Diaz-Balart, you have Norma Torres, Scott Franklin, Juan Siscomani, and Riley Moore, alongside the US ambassador to Nigeria, Richard Mills. Now, Rubadu himself expressed optimism that the talks would translate into more robust collaboration. Well, in the coming moments, 83-year-old Ivorian President Alassane Ouattara will be sworn in for his 4th term as leader of president of Ivory Coast. Now, following elections on the 25th of October, which did see main opposition candidates, including former President Laurent Gbagbo and Credit Suisse former CEO Tidjani Thiam, blocked from running, Ouattara won 89.8% of the vote. And that being said, the swearing in at the presidential palace in Abidjan this morning at 10 a.m. will be attended by world leaders and their representatives, including our own Nigerian Vice President Kashim Shettima is already there, Adama Barrow of Gambia, for example. Angola's Foreign Minister Tete Antonio is also in Ivory Coast, and there's also a US delegation led by the US Secretary of State for Economic Affairs Jacob Hellberg, which signals US President Donald Trump is in support of this Ivorian presidency. Very, very interesting. Now, we wrap up today's World Brief with today being, of course, the 8th of December. That marks 1 year since Bashar al-Assad, let me just get out of the way so you can see his face there, was toppled, and that essentially ended 61 years of Ba'athist rule. Now, Assad himself fled Syria for Russia a year ago today, and that's as rebels commanded by Syria's new president, Ahmed al-Sharaa, seized Damascus, toppling him more than 13 years into a war that spiraled out of an uprising against his own rule. Celebrations have been underway in some parts of Syria over the weekend for several days, essentially, and they will continue on today. Thousands of people filled the streets of Hama on Friday, waving Syria's new flag, and official celebrations are planned for today in the central Umayyad Square in Damascus, happening later. Well, let's take a look at our newspapers. As ever, we begin with the front page of This Day this morning. Let's take a look at This Day. Now, This Day does report that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has deployed Nigerian air and ground troops to Benin Republic after President Patrice Talon of the Benin Republic alerted him to this attempted coup, helping loyal forces restore order. Now, the federal government and ECOWAS have condemned the plot, while the Campaign for Democracy warned that governance failures keep fueling coups in the region. Let's take a look at, well, actually still on This Day, also on the front page, there is reports that France has, as we just reported, pledged stronger counter-terrorism support to Nigeria. This is following the president's request, and that NSA, Nuhu Rubadu, did meet with a visiting US congressional delegation to further cooperation in terms of security. They were on a fact-finding mission. Let's take a look at the leadership paper this morning. Lovely. So the leadership this morning does report that some 100 of the 315 students who were captured from St. Mary's Catholic School in Papuri, Niger State, have reportedly been released. If we move on to the Vanguard this morning, it does report that following this attempt on this Benin Republic itself, there were reports that Pascal Tigru was at large, but we had seen earlier reports that he has also been detained. So a little bit of confusion there with our newspapers. That being said, if we move on to the Daily Trust this morning, the Daily Trust does ask this question again: why coups are unsettling West Africa? It's a big conversation. Essentially, as we already reported, there have been a lot of coups specifically across West Africa itself. Now, this article goes on to say that this attempted coup in Benin was quickly foiled with Nigeria's assistance, but again, the questions do remain. Let's move on to our next paper. Let's take a look today at the Daily Sun. Now, the Daily Sun reports that the Centre, there we go. So you've got the Centre for the Promotion of Private Enterprise warning that Nigeria's 2026 medium-term expenditure framework shows debt servicing of 15.91 trillion naira. That is 46% of projected revenue, and they're saying that this threatens development spending. Still, let's continue on to the Daily Independent. The Daily Independent this morning does report that the Dangote refinery and the NNPCL may list on the Nigerian exchange in 2026, potentially expanding Nigeria's stock market from 20% to 80% of GDP and boosting the drive towards a $1 trillion economy. Let's take a look at The Guardian. The Guardian this morning does, of course, weigh in on what we've been discussing in terms of the coup attempt, but there's actually a story that does jump out at us towards the side there. And what we're seeing is that the Corporate Affairs Commission, the CAC, is saying that it will shut down all unregistered POS, point of sale operators, from the 1st of January 2026. They are warning that many agents are often aided by some fintechs. They're violating CBN regulations with their operations. Security agencies have been directed to seize unregistered terminals, and operators are urged to register immediately. Let's move on to The Punch. The Punch this morning also weighs in on Macron, the security crisis, but actually a story that jumps out is just this one on the very bottom here, and that's a picture you see of Nnamdi Emeh, who has won an international award, but unfortunately he remains in prison in Anambra. This is nearly 3 years after he was granted bail. This follows repeated delays and alleged obstruction by police and court officials. Now, his family and rights groups say that his continued detention reflects retaliation and impunity, despite the allegations against him that he exposed senior officers. So very interesting there. The New Telegraph, let's take a look at the New Telegraph this morning. Lovely. So the New Telegraph does report that the Labour Party House Caucus has urged President Tinubu and the APC to prioritise Nigerians' welfare and security, essentially, over their 2027 ambitions. Let's quickly take a look at some British papers. We've got the Metro up first, and the Metro does have a look at this very troubling story that happened over the weekend in Heathrow Airport. So there was a lot of travel disruption caused by a pepper spray attack at Heathrow Airport, and this is the lead story of the Metro. It says that the flights were cancelled and some were delayed after armed police were called to a multi-storey car park at Terminal 3 on Sunday. Finally, let's take a look at the Financial Times. Now, the Financial Times does have President Emmanuel Macron. It's just a tiny weeny story there. Is going to be in the United Kingdom. He's going to be in London today, and in order for him to meet, of course, Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, but they're all there, including the German leader, because Volodymyr Zelensky will be in London to discuss Ukraine and ongoing negotiations under US mediation. So a lot happening around the world today, from our World Brief to our newspapers. Love to hear your thoughts.
All right, thank you so much, Adefemi. We're completely out of time.
Oh.
Yes, we have a number of guests as well today. And of course, we had Punarima just giving us updates on what's happening this morning. Well, thank you very much for a very thorough analysis of today's newspapers and of course bringing us the World Brief this morning.